Welcome everybody to the Primary Spine Provider Network webinar Masterclass series. Today, we're interviewing Dr. Andrew Bigness, graduate of Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College and graduate of the 100-hour certification program as a primary spine practitioner from the University of Pittsburgh, and now working in Toronto. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We're really interested in hearing your perspective on primary spine care, but let's start with talking a little bit about your background. What brought you into the chiropractic profession originally, and why did you choose CMCC?
Okay, so I started suffering from lower back pain as a teenager, I suppose. Lots of injuries suffered through physical activity and sports. Lots of discogenic stuff going on at the time that was probably misinterpreted. However, I was treated by a chiropractor back then, and I did very, very well with the treatment. So I had always taken an interest in anatomy, biology, that type of stuff. And so I decided, based on my experiences, that this was something I wanted to get into. Applying to CMCC was maybe just more convenience than everything. I always knew that they had a really good reputation, but being from Windsor, Ontario, Toronto was only a 4-hour drive away. So I could have gone north, or I could have gone west, I suppose, towards Chicago. Nationals probably about a 4 or 5 hour drive away as well. But I decided to focus on applying for CMCC, and it's really the only school I did apply to. And I had backup plans if I didn't get in, but thankfully I did.
Yeah. Did you think you'd stay in healthcare, or were you looking at other professions?
I had a lot of different interests at the time. Through my undergrad doing bio and biochem, I was interested in immunology and animal behavior, if you can believe it or not. But I always knew I wanted to do some sort of a pre-med sort of thing. So I focused mostly on biochem, and with the goal of becoming a chiropractor. So yeah, okay. Well, I was accepted and just went from there.
Yeah, and I see in practice that you've worked as an associate, that you've owned your own clinic and now moved into a what sounds like a multidisciplinary program. So
so I have done a little bit of everything. Obviously I started as an associate. I actually still currently own my own practice in Windsor, Ontario, which I tend to work on weekends. And then now I've been hired on by St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto to act as the practice lead and their advanced practice clinician for something called the Rapid Access Program for Lower Back Pain, which is a provincial initiative to try to streamline patient access to specialist care. We can get into many different facets of the program if you have.
Well, I really would like to, but I want to try to lay a little bit more groundwork in terms of how you got to where you're at, because I think that's what it is for our audience. That's really what's interesting is how do I, all right, you did this now. How, what are the steps that led you into that? So give me a little bit of a perspective on your take of working as an associate initially and then opening your own practice. Had you the ability to do things over again, would you follow the same path, do you think?
I think I would have had to. It's no surprise to anyone that student loans are a really big concern for new graduates. So getting experience as an associate where you can start treating patients, earning a living, paying your student loans back, and getting exposure and learning as you go is a great scenario. However, there are a lot of chiropractors that hire new grads, and they can be predatory and they can talk you into bad contracts. And unfortunately, one of the experiences I had fresh out of school was my associate position didn't really go well. I felt like I was being taken advantage of. So there was a learning experience there as well. So I did that for about 1.5 years before I moved back to Toronto and actually started working motor vehicle accident rehab and doing independent medical examinations, those sorts of things, which were not as enjoyable as treating patients, right? It would be no surprise to a lot of chiropractors that motor vehicle accident patients are motivated in many different ways. often by lawyers and often by lawsuits. And when I was doing that, I felt like it kind of killed my chiropractic soul. So after going through that, I definitely went back to focusing more on general practice, which I enjoy much, much better.
Oh, great, great. And did you, so when you opened your own place, did you keep your associateship position while you were transitioning, or did you just cut ties? Well, I guess you must have, because you moved to a new community.
Yeah, well, so I moved back to Windsor, Ontario, which is originally where I'm from. So I managed to get myself fired by having really strong ethics at the Motor Vehicle Accident Clinic. If there's a recurring theme or a motif to my career, it's always been that ethics have been so strong, almost to a fault, that it has led to some changes down the road. So so I started telling lawyers, no, I'm not putting certain things on disability certificates, and I got myself fired. But we had decided to move back to Windsor when we were starting a family, my wife and I. So I started working with the chiropractor who originally treated me as a teenager and was influential in me choosing this career path. So I worked with him as an associate, and I ended up buying out his practice, and I was still working as an associate at a second location. So working 2 locations within Windsor was really, really good for me. It gave me exposure to different patient populations. As everyone knows, patients like to stay in their own neighborhood. So I was able to access more patients that way, and then just learn from 2 different chiropractors at the same time, and to continue to develop my skills that way.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody on the call, feel free to chime in. If you can't speak immediately, just raise your hand, click on the icon for that, or type in the chat box, and either David Payton or I will bring your question to the forefront. But please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions. Don't hesitate to interrupt as we're going along. That's excellent, Andrew. I think there's a lot of, certainly nowadays, largely because of what you suggested, the student loans, that you basically own a house now when you graduate, that you have a mortgage for a home without the home.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have to look at that education really as an investment in your future. And,
exactly. Yeah.
And keep reminding yourself of that.
Yeah.
I would suggest anyone.
Good debt, right? Good debt.
Yeah, it's good debt. You can leverage that debt.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. We have to remind ourselves of that. When do you think, did you always run your practice as a musculoskeletal type approach? Did you focus on, I know you mentioned you originally focused on motor vehicle accident, work comp type of work, independent medical exam?
That was situational, I think.
Okay, not so much.
Time, it was more like that was a means for me to generate income and position available. But I have always been very evidence-based and focused on delivering as best as I possibly could an evidence-based method of care. So that has always influenced the way I've practiced. There were some influential people around me when I was in school, in particular, Dr. Glenn Harris, who was one of my lead clinicians when I was in 4th year clinic in my pod. And he was very much up to date on research. People might know the name Sean Thistle, who runs Research Review Service. And he ran a small group with me. And so very much influential in terms of staying up to date with the literature. Some people might know who Mark Bronson is. Sure. He runs the evidence-based chiropractic. So he was my roommate in school. And so I've always just been surrounded by these people who are always just delivering me the evidence. So ask me to quote research, don't count on it. But I've always been up to date, and people around me have always been delivering this information to me. So I've always been in the know, and I'm trying to apply that stuff. And so that's just always been my approach, I guess, is to be clinically sound. Try to speak the same language as other health practitioners if you can. And this is something that the PSP program helped me with even more. And just deliver the best evidence-based care you possibly can for patients. And so now that I'm in my own practice, in when I am in Windsor. That's kind of how I like to deliver my care.
That's a wonderful distinction, Andrew, and I'm so glad to hear you make it, which is, I think many clinicians, while they embrace the principles of evidence-based care, feel a bit intimidated by it, in that they're not able to, be a Don Murphy. And, I wish I could be a Don Murphy and just have at your fingertips, reference after reference after reference. I don't know that I've ever met anyone as skilled at that as Don.
Yeah.
However, it's not necessary. The principle is just what you suggested, which is you learn the material and then you just incorporate that into the way you approach patient care. Whether you can remember the specific reference isn't important. Whether you understand the principle of evidence-based care is.
Right. So I'm a clinician. I spend 90% of my time with patients, maybe a little less now because I have to manage and train some other chiropractors for my current program. But when all you do is patient care and then you have to get home to your family and your kids, I just don't have the memory bank to like remember who authored what paper. I know what I know and I can apply it, but my focus is on being a clinician and not so much a researcher or a purveyor of the information. We've got great colleagues that do all that work for me, and I learn from them, and I let them quote all the literature, and I just try to deliver the work if I can.
That's right. You don't have to always know the information. You need to know where you can go get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Something I don't have problems with. And if I do have issues, I know who to text.
Yeah, exactly. That's why having that bank of resources available is so important.
They can put me in the right direction.
Yeah, you bet.